We are in Daf Tzadik Daled Amid Base 94b. The Mishnah had said that removing fingernails by using a fingernail, so pulling it off or biting it off, the same as for hair or facial hair. Rabbi Eliezer says chayiv, and as mentioned from Tues, this is according to Rabbi Yehuda, that says that melacha she'enet tzaricha legufa, even though you don't need the end result, it'll still be chayiv, it'll still be considered a melacha. So over here, even though you don't need the nail that you cut off, you don't need the hairs that you cut off, and nevertheless, you'd be chayiv. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, so Rabbi Eliezer said, machlokas biyad, that the machlokas in our Mishnah, whether somebody is chayiv or not, is whether you did so by hand. You sort of ripped off the nail or plucked out the hair. Aval b'kli d'var kol chayiv. But if you used a vessel for it, so a nail clipper or a scissors, everybody would agree chayiv. Pshita, so Gemara says that's obvious. The Mishnah indicates that itself by saying somebody who takes his nail off using his other nails, so it tears it off. Because I may have thought that the Rabbanan who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer and say that cutting off the nails are going to be a rabbinic prohibition, which we call shavus. That maybe really they say even if you use a vessel, it's going to be shavus. And the reason why it said in the beginning of the Mishnah that even if you tear it off, that Rabbi Eliezer says a chayiv, to tell you that even in that case, a chayiv. But maybe the Rabbanan go to the next step and say that not only when you tear it off or pluck out your hair and you by hand, are you going to be is it going to be a rabbinic prohibition and not a Torah prohibition? But even if you did so with a vessel. That's why it tells us, that's what Rabbi Eliezer told us, that indeed everybody agrees that if you use nail clippers, if you use the scissors, it would be chayiv. And again, this is according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, a vessel, an act that is not needed for the end result, nevertheless would be chayiv. So even though you don't need the nails, even though you don't need the hair, it would be chayiv. But Amar Rabbi Eliezer said machlokas li'atzman. This is only true. Another caveat is that if you did it for yourself, but if somebody tears off someone else's nails with their hand or plucks out somebody else's hair by a hand, that everybody would agree that's not a Torah prohibition, and you don't bring a sin offering for that, because that's an abnormal way of doing it. It's a pshita. That seems obvious as well because it says it's a part of his own nails. Well, again, I may have thought Rabbi Eliezer, who says that it is a Torah prohibition, would think that it's a Torah prohibition even when you do it for someone else. And the reason why our Mishnah spoke about it himself is to tell you the strength of the Chachamim's leniency, that even on himself, that it's they say it's lenient, but the same would be true.
Does it make a difference?
To tell you the Chachamim say the Chachamim's leniency, that it's exempt even for himself. Kamash Malan, that's why Rabbi Eliezer needed to tell us that these two caveats. So again, our Mishnah, we have the Mishnah, we have the Chachamim saying that it's rabbinic when you tear off your nails and tear off hair or cut or pull out some hair, and this is all according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says malacha she'eina tzricha legufa is chayiv, that it's a Torah prohibition to do a malacha even if you don't need the end result. Of course, according to Rabbi Shimon, as Tosis explains, that would be exempt of a Torah prohibition in any case because you're not using the end product, which is the nails that you cut off or the hair that you cut off. Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah says that you are chayiv, that it would be a Torah prohibition, and nevertheless, there's an exemption if you did so to someone else, which is an abnormal way of doing it.
Why wouldn't it be a tikkun kli?
What tikkun kli? How are you fixing a vessel?
Fixing myself. I want to be Shabbos Dick, and I forgot to clip my nails, so I have a visiting manicurist comes to my house and takes care of it. Why isn't that?
That's not a Torah prohibition of tikkun kli, fixing yourself. That would be a rabbinic fixing yourself. That would not be a Torah prohibition. You're already a person. L'chein tzaro. Similarly, it said hairs. Satana, we learned in regards to the prohibition of rending oneself, pulling out one's hair over a dead person, or and this is true for other prohibitions of where you're not allowed to cut hair, like in Nazir. It says, Tana anoitel maloi pi hazug chayiv. Somebody who takes out as much as a scissors would take out, chayiv. And this is a snip from the scissors. How much? As much as the mouth of the scissors, meaning just a snip. And how much is that? Amar Rabbi Yehuda shnayim. Rabbi Yehuda says 2 hairs. Natanya lekocha shnayim. We learned to the prohibition of pulling out hairs. It's 2 hairs. Yeah, and the brisa means to say so too for pulling out the hairs. It's 2 hairs. The Tani Namachi Anoitel Maloi Pi Azug b'Shabbos Chayiv, and brisa says that somebody who takes a scissor snip is on Shabbos is chayiv, and how much is that? The kamam lipi azug shtayim, and that would be 2 hairs. Rabbi Eliezer ima achas. However, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees and says even 1 hair would be a transgression of Shabbos. So moedech hachamim Rabbi Eliezer mamlaket levanos levanos mitech hashchoros shafila achas chayiv. The Chachamim agree, however, that to Rabbi Eliezer that pulling out 1 hair is going to be a transgression if you pull out a white hair amongst black hairs, and this would be the transgression even on a weekday. But the Torah prohibits a man to wear a woman's clothing, and the Gemara tells us that this is true not only for clothing but any form of beautification that is particularly done by women and not by men is prohibited. The Gemara has a list of things that, as long as they're not common for men to do, would be prohibited as lo yilbash. So, in a place and culture that men don't take out their white hairs, plucking a white hair from amongst the black hairs in order to beautify oneself, that would be an isser of lo yilbash. Tanya, Rav Shimon Elazar Eimer, Tzeporin Shapirish Ruba, Betzitcha Shapirish Ruba, Beyad Mutter Bekli Chayiv Chatas. Rabbi Eliezer says that if a nail, that most of it came off, and so it's hanging by a little bit, and similarly your cuticles, that mostly came off, so you're allowed to pull it off by hand, but if you use a vessel, that's a Torah prohibition. The Gemara says, Mi'ika midi. So we never have such a jump that anything that's a Torah prohibition with a vessel, then by hand, even though it's not a Torah prohibition, the Chachamim would, as a fence, prohibit it. So why would it be here that if most of it is off, you're allowed to pull it off by the rest of it by hand, but if you use the nail clipper, it's going to be a Torah prohibition? Hachikama. So Gemara says, you're right. Pirsharuban, if most of the nail is off, biyad mutar b'kli pater avalas, that indeed you're allowed to pull it by hand, no problem. And if you did it but with a vessel, it would be a rabbinic prohibition, because since it's mostly off already, then even if you use a nail clipper, it's not going to be a Torah prohibition. However, lo pirsharuban, if most of it is not off, biyad pater, if you pulled it off by hand, it is a rabbinic prohibition as a fence, but it is not a Torah prohibition. Pater avalasir. And if you use a nail clipper, it would be a Torah prohibition. Amar Rav Yehuda, halachic Rabbi Shimon and Elazar. Halacha is indeed like the statement of Rabbi Shimon and Elazar that most of it is hanging, whether it's a cuticle or a nail, that it is permissible to pull it off, but not to use a vessel. But it has to be that it is separated upward, and it's annoying and painful to him. So Rashi learns upward means away from the body, and so the cuticle is annoying because it's sticking up, or the nail is away from the body. And Tosus learns that it's into the body, and so it's painful because it's sort of poking inward. In any case, in that case, since most of it is off already anyhow, you can pull it off by hand. V'chein agodelas. Also braiding hair. So the Mishnah said braiding hair. Kocheles is putting blue dye on the eyes, which is a type of makeup, and pokeses, which we mentioned yesterday. Rashi has various interpretations of what it may be, either making a part in the hair and making it. It takes diligent work to make a part, or running your fingers through the hair to sort of comb it and pulling out hairs that way, or Rashi has another version here, which is putting on a sort of a waxing on the face in order to create red cheeks. So godeles, kocheles, pokeses, mashamai mechayim. So I'm going to ask, what prohibitions are these that Rabbi Eliezer says it's a Torah prohibition? Amar Rabbi Yavin, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, godeles mashum oregas. Braiding hair is because of weaving. Kocheles mashum koseves. And putting on the blue dye on the eye is writing. And pokeses mashum tovet. And pokeses is weaving. If it's weaving, Tessa says it can't really be putting either running your fingers through the hair. That's not weaving. You're pulling out some stuff, unless the Gemara means that it's a preparation for weaving, because you're going to use the hairs to as a thread to weave. Also, putting on a waxing in order to make your cheeks red. How would that be weaving? But the Rashi in Mod Katan, where Rashi says that it means making a part, and it's pulling the hairs from to one side and the other hairs to the other in order to make a part. That's more like weaving, which does require a setting up of the vertical hairs, vertical threads in order to make a weave, and that would be similar to that. In any case, what are you talking about? These are abnormal ways of weaving and writing and spinning threads. So what are you talking about? How can that be considered a Torah prohibition under those categories? Rabbi Yosef Chanina explained this to me, and we're now on 95a Tzadi Hey Amud Aleph. Kocheles mishum tzevas. Dyeing is a prohibition, and in the hairs, as are in putting on the blue dye in the eye, is the same. Also, it's tzovea, it's dyeing, and the distinction between writing and dyeing is dyeing is where you want the background to absorb the color so that it looks like that's its color. And writing is where you want it to look like a color on top of the surface. And that's the way the Mefarshim explain. So godeles and braiding hair, upokesas, mishum bonet. Those are building. It's creating a structure. And here too, you can ask, is that really a form of construction? In, like we saw, Brisa, the Dorosh Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, Vayiven Hashem esatzela, Hashem constructed the bone taken from Adam to build a Chava. And where was the construction? Malamet Shekila. So we saw several times that there's a machlokas in the Gemara of whether from the start Adam and Chava were created as two humans conjoined, and then Hashem just split Chava from Adam. So if that's the case, so what does it mean? Hashem built Chava. Chava was already a constructed human beforehand. So what is Vayiven? Vayiven Malamet Shekila Kadosh Baruch Hu Chava ve'aviyah etzel Adam, that he braided her hair to beautify her in order to bring her to Adam as a bride. Shekain Mikrachayayam Karan L'Kaliyasa Benisa, as in some languages from the islands, the word for braiding is Banisa, building. So we see that braiding is a form of building. Tanya, Rab Shimon Elazar Eimer Gedelos Kecheles Pekesas LaAtzma Petura LaChaverta Chayeves. Even though in our Mishnah it says that Rabbi Eliezer would prohibit on a Torah as a Torah prohibition and say that somebody has to bring a sin offering if they did it for braiding hair and dyeing the eyes and etc. These are true only if you do it for someone else, because then you can do it properly. But if you do it for yourself, where you can't really do it well, that would not count as a Torah prohibition, because you can't really do it well, and it doesn't, and it's not the normal way of doing it. So I assume that that's not so. That doesn't really apply today, because we have proper mirrors, and I think that most people don't have a maiden put on their makeup every day. Rather it's something that people do for themselves. I think that's generally not considered an abnormal way of doing it. But in those times, it was abnormal. So doing it for yourself was considered abnormal, and therefore an exemption from the Torah prohibition and an exemption from a chatas, even according to Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah, who in our Mishnah says there is a chatas. And another statement that Rabbi Shimon Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, not only dyeing the eye blue, but any type of makeup on the face is not allowed to be put on Shabbos on account of it's tzoveah. And the general rule for tzoveah is something that can last for the day. So there are powders, powder makeup that some say is permissible on Shabbos, because they don't last for the day. But any type of oil-based makeup which stays on the face is prohibited to put on as tzoveah. But if it doesn't last, then it's permissible. Tana Rabbana. Hacholev, somebody who milks a cow, a goat, it's a sheep, milks an animal. V'mechabetz, and somebody who makes cheese, but in the early stages where they're curding the cheese, creating the curds or separating the curds. Megabe, and somebody who presses the cheese together in order to construct it into a block. Kurgigeres, as long as you do one fig size, which is always in regards to halachas of Shabbos, is the measure, the minimum amount when it comes to food. And similarly, hamachabed, v'hamarabetz, v'haroi dechalas dvash, somebody who sweeps on Shabbos, and their floors were made of or basically the ground, and so by sweeping, you're straightening out you're smoothing out the earth, which we saw as a part of construction. It's bonet inside the house. V'hamarabetz, and somebody who after they swept, there was dust in the house, and so they would sprinkle water around to bring the dust down. And somebody who extracts honey from the honeycomb. So shogeg b'Shabbos chayv chatas, somebody does so inadvertently on Shabbos, meaning they didn't know that it was prohibited or they didn't know it was Shabbos, so then they bring a sin offering. Is it beyantiv lekarba? And if you did so intentionally on yantiv, there's lashes 40 malchus. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says, that these are Torah prohibitions. The Chachamim say these are rabbinic prohibitions. So Rav Nachman bar Gurya ikela narda. So Rav Nachman bar Gurya came to Narda. They asked him a question. Teach us, which of the prohibitions of Shabbos, which of the malachas of Shabbos does somebody transgress when they milk an animal? Amaluhu, he said to them, milking itself is a prohibition. Mechabetz, making curds. What prohibition is that? That itself is a prohibition. What about making cheese? That itself is a prohibition. Now, obviously, these are not one of the 39 malachas. They could be subcategories of 39 malachas, but not a category of itself. Amar Luhu, so they said to them, to Rav Nachman bar Gurya, Rabbah, whoever was your teacher, unfortunately did not teach you well. Katel kani ba'agma. He should have been cutting reeds. In other words, he was out in the swamp. I'm sure he was good at something else. A nice way of saying he didn't teach you. Shal be medrasha. So he went to the base medrash and asked Amrle. They said to him, "Cholev chayim mafarik." That somebody who milks is mafarik, is an extraction, and Rashi learns the extraction is a toldov dush. It's a second. It's a second. The secondary case within the category of threshing. Just as threshing takes the grain from within the husk, so too anytime you have juices or something within that's encapsulated in something else. So maybe the juices in a grape, or the milk in the udder glands. These it's there, but it's encapsulated. And when you squeeze it out, you are now mafarik, you're extracting what's the food, or in this case, the drink, the liquid that's inside, encapsulated, inside that outer layer. And it's similar to threshing, dehusking, and Torah prohibition. Mafarik. And schita, squeezing would be similar to that, which is the prohibition of squeezing out. So this is mafarik. Others have other interpretations as to what mafarik may be. Mechabit. What is
schita? Meaning schita's parents, right? Not schita's, not koives.
I don't understand what you're saying.
If you wring out a wet cloth, I thought that's koives.
That's another interpretation. But
I mean, it's two different schitas, or it's the same. It's the same. It's considered the same tolda, or it's two different. There's one is for Paris, and there's one for clothing, or is it the same one?
So there are those that say that when you squeeze out clothing, the prohibition there is that you're cleaning it. You're washing it essentially by squeezing it out, and that would be true in certain cases, but it would not be true in other cases, depending if you're squeezing out water, squeezing out what you're squeezing out of it, and if it makes it better or worse by squeezing. Sometimes when you squeeze it, if it had a dirty, colored juices in it, so you had wine that you picked up with a towel and you squeeze it out into the sink, it could actually spread in the white towel that you cleaned it up with, and that wouldn't be cleaning it necessarily. Now, there are different interpretations. There too, it could be that you're extracting the juices. And there would be a schita issue. Same goes squeezing out hair. Somebody washed their hair got wet, and they squeeze it out. That would also be schiti, taking the juices out from within the hair. That would not be necessarily because of washing it. There are different interpretations as to what mafarik would be in food, whether it is, as I said, dash or others. We're going with Rashi, says dash. Mechavetz, making curds. So Rashi said actually two things: either that it's the making of the curd, so putting in the enzymes which make the curds separate from the whey, or once it's already curded and you're hanging it in a cheesecloth in order for the whey to drip out. Either one is going to be mechavetz. Chaimashim borer, you're separating, and that's separating the selecting of the good from the bad, or bad from the good. Megabing, forming the cheese by pressing it together. Chaimashim boner, that's constructing. Mechabit Hamarabitz v'haroi dechalas dvash b'Shabbos chayv chatas. Here's a beyond of like Alban the Rabbi Eliezer. So and then we saw somebody who sweeps and somebody who puts water out for dusting, and as we explained, the sweeping is constructing because you're fixing the floor, you're smoothing out, flattening the floor, and Marabitz is putting the dust down and watering, essentially putting water on the floor. And Narod Chalas is extracting the honey from a honeycomb. So Hamar Rabbi Eliezer, my time at Rabbi Eliezer, what's the basis for Rabbi Eliezer to say that the honeycomb is a Torah prohibition? The Chsifra, it says, Vayitbalos V'yaros Adavash. Yonasan dunked, essentially dunked his food in the honey, so he stuck his stick. He stuck it into a honeycomb, and there it says, "V'yaros hadvash," in the forest of honey. So why is it call it forest when it's talking about honey? Just as somebody who uproots something in a forest is tolish, is detaching something from its life source, from the ground, and therefore that's harvesting, as it were. Chayiv chatas, and there's a chatas prohibition for that, meaning it's a Torah prohibition. Af chalas dvash, so too the honeycomb, which is also attached. So detaching the honey from the honeycomb is also going to be a chatas, a Torah prohibition. Hameimar shara zilcha b'mechuzah. The Meimar said in Mechuzah, where people were wealthy and they had stone floors, that that you were allowed to sweep the floor. Why did the Chachamim say that you're not allowed to sweep on a dirt floor? Because you're going to flatten out the floor. You're taking some dirt from one place and you're moving it into where it's uneven and there's a little bit of a ditch, and you're moving it in there to flatten it out. But in a tiled stone floor, there are no holes in the floor. Rabbi Tzvi Ashkechelo Ravina. He found Ravina the Komitzar Me'avla, that the dust from sweeping was bothering him. And some say it was the elder of Rava's children, Mar Kashisha, Mar the elder, who said to Rav Ashi, who saw Rav Ashi the Komitzar Me'avla, who was being bothered by the dust. Somebody wants to put water in his house to keep the dust down before sweeping or once it's swept. Maybe so he brings a bucket full of water, a basin full of water. So then he washes his face in one corner, and by doing so, he splashes the water on his face, and that gets water all over the place and keeps the dust down. And then he goes to the other corner, and he washes his feet there and splashes it on his feet, and that keeps the dust down. And then as a result of all his washings in different spaces in the house, in the room, it keeps the dust down. Amalei lavadatai. I didn't think about that. Tana Isha Chachama. We learned a wise woman, Merabetzas Beisa B'Shabbos, can keep the dust down in the house by sprinkling water all over the place in such a manner where she washes different things in different places. However, since we follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, that Davar Sheina Mischavin is mutter, we follow Rabbi Shimon that since you don't intend something, you're allowed to do it anyhow. So when you sprinkle the water in the room, it's to keep the dust down, but not actually to make clumps in order to create a brick or clay. You're not trying to mix water and dirt in order to form something. You're just trying to keep the dust out of the air. Even there, it's even permissible lechatchila to do it. You don't have to come up with I'm washing my face in this corner. At the Mishnah at the bottom of Tzadi Ham on Aleph, and the Mishnah said that tolesh me'atzitz nakuv chayiv. Somebody has a potted plant, and the potted plant has holes in it, where now you can say that the roots that are in there in the potted plant are absorbing moisture from the ground, from the beneath the ground, and connected therefore to the soil that it's on. So chayiv. So if you pluck something from there, it's like detaching it from the ground, and it's a Torah prohibition. But if the potted plant is in a solid pot that has no hole in it, so then you're going to be exempt. But Rabbi Shimon says either way, it doesn't count as connected to the ground. And if you pick something off of a atzitz, even a atzitz nakov, even a potted plant that has a hole in it, it's going to be a rabbinic prohibition, not a Torah prohibition. Rami le Abaye l'Rav. Abaye questioned Rav. L'Rav Tanan Rabbi Shimon pointed b'zeh b'zeh. In our mission, it says Rabbi Shimon exempts in both cases. Alma nakav l'Rabbi Shimon kaina nakav mashvila, which tells us that he considers both a potted plant with a hole in the pot and a potted plant with a solid pot. Either way, it's detached from the ground and doesn't consider them connected to the ground, and he sees no difference between the two. And yet, for a minute, we have a contradiction. He says that there's no distinction between a potted plant that has a hole or no hole, and now we turn the page to Tzadi Hey Amud Beis. There is a distinction only in this manner, in this issue, that seeds inside seeds that are inside a potted plant that has a hole, it's considered attached to the ground, and those seeds are not susceptible to tumah because they're attached to the ground. However, seeds in a potted plant that has no hole is considered detached from the ground, so therefore it's considered food, and as food, it is susceptible to tumah. As we know, anything that's attached to the ground is not susceptible to tumah, and these seeds that are in a potted plant with the hole are considered attached to the ground. They're not susceptible to tumah. So in any case, we see that he does consider them attached to the ground. You're right. Indeed, as our Mishnah indicates, Rabbi Shimon considers all potted plants to be detached from the ground, regardless of whether they have a hole, the pot has a hole or not. So why is it a distinction only in regards to the susceptibility of tumah on the seeds in a potted plant that has a hole? Because there the Torah specifically said an extra term in order to tell us that it remains tahor, non-susceptible to tumah, as long as it's attached to the ground because it's seeds. And Eitzel Zroim, there's a specific leniency there. Why? Because the pasuk says an extra word. Shenamar al kol zera zeru asher yizarea. When water comes upon intentionally comes upon food or seeds, then it's going to be susceptible to tumah. And there the Torah says, any seed which is planted, which can be planted, and that's an extra term called zera zerua asher yizorea. So it tells us that it has to be seeds actually detached enough that you can plant them, and if it's in a potted plant that has a hole, that's enough connected to the ground that it's considered. It's not considered planting seed. It's attached, still attached to the ground and not susceptible to it. What would be the halacha according to Rabbi Shimon? Mali Amar Rabbi Shimon. What would Rabbi Shimon say? Who says that a potted plant, even if it has a hole, is not considered attached to the ground? But what happens if there's a root right going across that hole that that's in the potted plant? And so now that root has no soil in the potted plant there, so it's getting moisture from the air space, which means that it's considered attached to the ground. What would Rabbi Shimon say about that? Ishtik. So he was silent. He didn't respond. Zimna chada, but one time he met him, and another time he asked him the same question, and he heard him teaching. Rabbi Shimon agrees that if the hole was so large that the vessel, the pot itself that the plant is in, would no longer be susceptible to tumah because it's got such a large hole that does make it connected to the ground. I asked you about just a root going across the hole, and you didn't tell me anything. If it's got such a large hole, do I even need to know about that? In other words, the fact that you consider connected to the ground with a large hole, even though there's no roots there, it's just soil. So you have a potted plant with a lot of soil in it, and the soil is really blocking that hole, but the hole is large enough that moisture can come in from there, and therefore the atmosphere, and therefore it's considered connected to the ground. For sure, if the root is there, that should count. If Rabbi Zera's statement about the hole is correct, then this is the statement that should be said. Rabbi Shimon agrees that if the hole is on the bottom of the vessel, where it's so low that a revius of liquid, a quarter lug of liquid cannot be contained in that vessel, that would be enough to consider the potted plant connected to the ground, because the pot is broken enough that it has it's absorbing and connection and is considered connected to the ground, meaning that it has to be below on the bottom surface of the vessel. That's where the hole is, and therefore it's considered connected to the ground. Amar Rabba, and that's the text there should say. Amar Rabba. Rabba said, Chamesh midas b'kli cheres. There are 5 levels of holes in an earthenware vessel that would change its halacha in susceptibility to tumah, and then they would depend on how large that hole is. So he goes through them. Nikev k'maitzi mashka. If the hole is enough that if there's small enough that liquid inside the vessel would seep out, but if you had liquid outside the vessel, which doesn't have the pressure, obviously, it would roll off but wouldn't leak in. So that's considered nikiv kamotzi mashka. It has a hole enough that liquid inside the vessel can seep out. So tohar militame gistra. So it would mean that it's not susceptible to tumah, that if it was a shard. We'll see there's many times that they used to use shards of broken vessels for particular uses. They would cover vessels with it and cover holes with it, etc. But it had to not have a hole in it. If even a little bit of a hole in the shard, then it's already a shard, and liquids can seep through it, so it was a worthless shard, and that would not be susceptible to tumah. So even though that a shard itself has some usage, so you have a broken earthenware vessel, you have a large enough shard, you could say, oh, this is a piece of earthenware vessel I'm going to keep because I can use it. That's is still susceptible to tumah because it's now a vessel for whatever use you plan on using it. But if it has a hole that liquid can go through, that's no longer even a shard, and it's not susceptible to tumah. But if it was a proper vessel, it would be a vessel in as much that it's even going to count for the red heifer water to be in there. But if it has enough of a hole that not only can liquid seep out, but if you pour liquid on the outside, it would seep in. That is now it's no longer a valid vessel, which is susceptible to tumah as a vessel, and it's not a valid vessel in as much that you can't use it for the red heifer water. But it is enough of a vessel that it would that you could that you could make other things susceptible to tumah. That meaning, as we saw before, that seeds that are in a potted plant are considered detached from the ground, and they are susceptible to tumah. They're considered food and not considered a plant. And so this food so this hole in the vessel is enough. This hole where the liquid can come in, not only seep out, but even come in, is enough to say it's not a vessel for the susceptibility of for a red heifer water, but it is enough of a vessel that the potted plant in there is considered food and susceptible to tumah, and it's not considered a plant attached to the ground. Nikiv kashurish katam. Now, if you have a hole in there enough like a small root, then then the food in there is considered, the plant in there is considered connected to the ground, not according to Rabbi Shimon as we saw before. According to the Chachamim, that plant is now considered in a potted plant that's attached to the ground and is not considered food, but rather it's considered something attached to the ground and not susceptible to tumah. However, it can still contain olives. It can't contain water anymore, and it can't even contain seeds, but it can contain olives, and therefore anything that requires olives are going to be it's going to be enough of a vessel for a simple tumah. Nikev kamatzi zaysim. However, if it has enough of a hole, the large enough hole that olives will fall out of it, but it can contain larger fruit like pomegranates. So anything that tumah of olive size would not apply to this vessel because it can't contain olives, but it would still be large enough to contain pomegranates. So and therefore it's going to have if it's made for larger fruit, it's going to count as a vessel and would have susceptibility for tumah if you're intending to use it for larger fruits. Nikev kamatzer remanim, but once the hole is large enough that it can't even contain pomegranates, tar miklum. At that point, it's not a vessel at all and is not susceptible to any form of tumah if the size of the vessel is kamotzi rimon, that a pomegranate would fall out of that vessel. And this is a general rule that in breaking a vessel for its susceptibility to tumah, we say kamotzi rimon. It has to be large enough that a pomegranate will fall out. We'll continue with this discussion about the vessels and the susceptibility to tumah when it has a hole in it and how to seal that tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem.